Great. Welcome, everybody, and welcome back to those of you who have been attending all along or viewing on your own. And welcome back to me. I wasn't here last week. Those of you who were here for the webinar on the LinkedIn profile got to meet my colleague, Lindsay Granger-Weaver, and we got some nice feedback from that session. So I hope you all found it informative and helpful. I'm Christine Valenza-Shin, for those of you who might be newly registered or newly attending. I'm the Associate Dean for Beyond Barnard and here to talk today about networking online and in person. I looked back at my PowerPoint from last summer and I think I had taken off the in-person because it was not happening, but of course we're in a different place a year since then. And so I went back to the old title, and we'll talk about in-person sometimes means just live on screen, but in any case, we want to look at both types of networking. So we are going to look at brief introduction, just looking sort of big picture at networking, why we do it, what's powerful about it, and then focus in on growing your network online. And we'll take a few tours there, and then talk about some live or in-person networking opportunities that you've probably taken advantage of in the past, but maybe give you some new ideas as well. So, always a key point that networking is an ongoing thing. It's not just when you are seeking a job or seeking a change or shifting gears, but it is for everybody. It's an ongoing activity. It doesn't have to be constant, and you could definitely ramp it up during periods of change and when you are seeking new opportunities. But it's a broad-based activity, and as the next slide talks about, it is an organic process. It's something that's existed for, it wasn't just invented in the 80s when networking events and tips began to abound. It's something that's always people have always used to get through jobs, to get to jobs and opportunities, build their businesses. So, and at its most basic, it's building and maintaining relationships, with a professional focus. Obviously, can be overlap between the personal and the professional, but it's looking at professional relationships of the people you currently work with, that you used to work with, and other people that you have connections with around your professional interests, fields that you are in or exploring. And networking obviously has, been transformed, as has so much else in our digital age. Online tools have made it much easier to find people, to stay in touch with people. But part of the reason we want to look today at both online networking and in-person is that the in-person connections are often more powerful. So again, whether like this year that's taken place via, Zoom or other video platforms, or we do go back to a world where we're working together in person more extensively than we have been, and consequently, being able to meet for coffee or otherwise attend events, all of that coming back. But the in-person piece is important, and they're not mutually exclusive. Often you are looking for people online that you are hoping to connect to in person, and the reverse. You may meet somebody in any number of settings, personal or professional, and then follow up with them online and maintain that relationship that way. Today, we want to specifically talk about your Barnard network, although it's really a stand-in. None of this is exclusive to Barnard. We want to make the argument that you have a very strong network in Barnard, but most of what we'll talk about in terms of building that network, reconnecting to that network, is applicable to your other connections. And just pointed out a few other sources of networking, who's already in your network. So certainly colleagues, going back as far as you would like, managers, etc. And, we're going to, as I said, talk a lot about Barnard, but you also have alumni connections via high school, and if you've been to graduate school, so those connections are out there as well. And family and friends, even if they haven't, even if they're not directly in your field, can also be, strong connections and possibilities as well. but let's talk a little bit about Barnard. So first of all, we've got, I forget what I'm bad at big numbers. I don't tend to hold them into my memory, but we have an extensive Barnard network of women around the world. The concentration, as most of you may know, is in the greater New York City area. I think the stat that's often quoted is that 50% of alumni live within 50 miles of a 50-mile radius of the city. And, it's certainly one of the strengths of the colleges. And while you were a student, having that alumni base here in New York was really helpful, and many people obviously stay. But there's also, that leaves the other half of the alumni community is around the country and around the world. And what we found is depending on the region, depending on numbers and the leadership, there can be a lot of camaraderie in regions away from New York. One of the rules of thumb I've often sort of seen evidence of is the further away from Barnard you get physically, the more excited somebody is to hear from you and connect with you. So whether that's, again, internationally or around the country. It's a strong bond, even people who, there's a little bit of a love-hate for the college experience, I think everywhere, but sometimes seems accentuated at Barnard. But even people who didn't love being here or had some serious issues with the college while they were here, that connection is strong, and the connection to each other tends to be strong, whether it's people you knew or people you meet later, through that Barnard connection. In general, part of what we try and teach our students and echo to you as alumni is to take advantage of that strong feeling that people have about the college and that connection to each other, and don't hesitate to ask things of the network and to reach out. Students especially can be a little hesitant, a little shy to reach out to somebody where the only thing they have in common is Barnard. They don't actually know each other. But what we found in general, and particularly this last year and a half has heightened that, is that it is a very welcoming community of, made up of individuals who are often very happy to help. And this notion of women helping women, I think, is very strong. This sense that women can be at a deficit in terms of, the strong networks that exist, across different industries among men. And, and there's often that sort of feminist notion of we need to build and take advantage of our network and help each other out. So, and I think the other pervasive thing that we hear a lot, whether an alum is coming back to the campus to speak or on a virtual panel, we very often hear stories of how people got their jobs, their first job, their later jobs. Is it through mentorship, through an internship, via an alumni connection. So there is a strong feeling of having been helped and wanting to help others in turn. So. All right, so that's sort of, I guess, my pitch, our Beyond Barnard pitch for the power of networking. If you are feeling hesitant, or if it's been a while, we encourage you to sort of dip a toe back in using Barnard as a framework. So next, let's take a look at what you can be doing online to grow your network. The first point, calling it a low-risk activity, it's low risk in the sense of, it's relatively easy to sort of poke around and look for people and find out information about their professional trajectory without, having to go out and, be in a large group or make a specific appointment. You can cover a lot of ground, find out a lot of information without directly connecting with people. And that's what I mean by low risk activity. Again, as I said, in our digital age, there's lots of great search tools to find people in your field. But then that communications piece, that relation piece is important, which is following up. And generally speaking, we want to talk about quality over quantity. Quantity is important. The bigger your network is, whether it's via LinkedIn or other platforms, there's something to be said for numbers, but you also want to be targeted in who you connect to, try and make where appropriate and where it's helpful to you, try for that deeper connection, whether that's, following, being able to meet somebody in person or do a phone chat, something like that. You want to sort of have a quality relationship where they actually get to know you a little bit, as opposed to just adding numbers to your network. Before we dive into LinkedIn, which is, probably the most powerful tool for some of the things we're talking about, I wanted to introduce you to Barnard Connect. Some of you may have already joined. This is something that we launched coming up on the 2-year anniversary. It's kind of like LinkedIn just for Barnard. It is an opt-in mentoring platform, connection platform on, students opt-in and alumni opt-in. And so you may have received invitations in the past, and we, of course, invite anybody who hasn't joined to consider it after today. I'll put the link in the chat towards the end of the presentation. I'm going to go through, I'm going to hope this works and link directly to it. We'll give it a second. Just want to give a quick little tour of what it looks like. Basically, you opt in and you become part of a community. By becoming part of the community, it allows you to be found by fellow alumni and by current students, and potentially, and then you would receive messages and requests to, have an email conversation or a phone or Zoom type of thing. Just wanted to show you a couple of quick features when you're new to this. If you just go to barnardconnect.barnard.edu. You're going to get, if you're not a member yet, you'll get a welcome and then a very user-friendly setting up an account. It's name and various other pieces of information that you can fill out. And then once you've completed that, you are an active member and can reach out or receive messages. And you can control in terms of, students reaching out to you, fellow alumni, you can control there's controls on the contacts, how many contacts you get per month, and what you're willing to talk about and mentor around. So, so I wanted to just show you one of our newer features, which is the creation of groups. We've been working closely with alumni relations who did a series of alumni circles during the past year and are going to continue them again in the fall. And we combined forces with them to create we've been able to recreate some of those groups on Barnard Connect. So we currently have 13 groups, and let me see if it's going to let me scroll through this. Oops, sorry. So you can join, you can request to join. Sorry, let me go back to the groups home. I just wanted to show you. So we've got, some of them are based around the fields, right? So ads, PR, and marketing. Some of them are based around interest area, student athletes, students with disabilities, Black alumni and students, more industry related. So these are just, this is a relatively new, we launched this a couple of months ago, the actual groups feature of this. And so obviously we are not representing yet all industries, all identity groups, but we're making a good start on this, and we'd love your feedback if you do join Barnard Connect, and if you do join the groups, we'd love to hear from you, or you're interested in the groups, we'd love to hear from you about what you might be interested in. Hit the wrong button. And then I just wanted to bring up Explore the Community, which is going to be your main tool if you are in fact looking to connect to other alumni. So basically once you're here, so we've got this active users is students and alumni combined. So it's going to be a smaller pool of people than you'll find on LinkedIn, which is why we're going to talk a lot about LinkedIn. But it's as I said, a self-selecting tool. So we see a very high rate of response on Barnard Connect. So so you can then use the search features you can look at location, you can look at major, you can look at industries, and then there's additional filters as well. I wanted to share with you and groups, but definitely take a look at this if you haven't already. And I'm just going to do a quick, now I'll wait and come back. Obviously, if that is going to be in, the more of you join and the more of you actively use it, it provides that really strong pool for students and then also for each other. So, and happy to answer more questions about that at the end of the presentation. So, but let's dive in and talk a little bit more about LinkedIn. As I noted, the advantage of LinkedIn over Barnard Connect, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can obviously use both. Is that LinkedIn is just it's a very large site. We've got over 20,000 alumni in our. When you look for alumni on LinkedIn, it's a huge pool and a very detailed search tools to be able to narrow that down. So let's take a look at, though, again, looking a little more broadly at some of the ways you can use LinkedIn, not just the job search, but in all these realms. And it sort of goes back to what we said at the beginning, is that networking is an ongoing process. Networking is for everyone, not just job seekers. So there's definitely a professional development aspect to it. And we use it a lot as a tool to help students and alumni do exploration, what's out there. We often, I think students especially would love us to have a list of fields and jobs and things that would, be a good connection for them. And that doesn't really exist, or it certainly doesn't exist in our resources. But LinkedIn can be a really good insight into what's out there, and where are people working, what are their roles, what are the details. Obviously, it is very helpful, as we talked about at the beginning, as a job search tool. Back at the beginning of the series, we talked about an open job market search and then the hidden job market search. So both LinkedIn can assist you both in the open job market through LinkedIn Jobs, as well as the networking piece. And then not to neglect the entrepreneurial, whether that's your full-time gig or a side gig you're considering or something that you're developing. There's a lot of really good uses for LinkedIn and obviously other social media for, promoting your product, your practice, other endeavors that you're considering. And, combined with what we talked about last week, LinkedIn is really about finding people as well as being found. So you can find people that you already know or used to know on LinkedIn. You also can develop new contacts. There's groups on LinkedIn, and then there's also company pages and company profiles that can be very helpful, as well as job postings on the separate tab, LinkedIn Jobs. And as Lindsay addressed last week, part of why you want to optimize your profile is to allow you to be found by potential employers, people in HR, or someone who's hiring for their team, searching. Recruiters and headhunters live on LinkedIn. It's a big piece of many recruiters and headhunters tools. Your fellow professionals can find you to connect, as well as fellow alumni, other people who are networking. So it's a two-sided process. And one of the things you want to think about is making LinkedIn in a habit. I think I said this back at the beginning of the series about the job search, that routine is more important than frequency. And what I'll often develop with people that are either new to LinkedIn or have been sort of neglecting it or want to increase their use of it is to develop a checklist of tasks, so that when you go on LinkedIn, so you may be, try and find 5 Barnard alumni working in X field, or reach out to 3 people to set up an informational interview or make connections. So you have your checklist. Other ways that you can use it or remember to use it more actively is to link it to your email. You can set it up so that if you get messages or you can go through and sort of select what you want to be contacted by. There is also a LinkedIn app on your phone. When it first launched, I didn't love it, but I do think it's been upgraded. I don't use it a lot personally on my phone, but it's definitely something to think about, that if that's your main point of access, that can be helpful. Just wanted to say a word about groups on LinkedIn. We're going to spend some time talking about reaching out to individuals, searching for individuals, but there are groups on LinkedIn. They've sort of evolved over the years. They're basically discussion groups where people can come in and post, so they might have a job opportunity or a question or something like that. And then other people reply. And if you look at people's profiles and scroll down, most people do seem to belong to a combination of alumni-based groups, high school, college, graduate school, and professionally based groups. So there are some groups that exist solely on LinkedIn, but a lot of the professional groups that exist are connected to professional associations. And so there's very often, a specific group for a professional association you may already belong to or that you're considering joining. When you find a group, you can take a look at their profile page, look at what they're about. Many of them are private, and so you have to ask to join, and then whoever owns or manages the group will take a look. Sometimes that happens very quickly in a very active group. Sometimes it's a little bit slower. And then some groups are public, and you can just jump right in and start asking and answering questions. So something to think about. How you find groups on LinkedIn, there are a couple different ways. LinkedIn, especially as you create a profile or if you update your profile, will start recommending you, like all social media, they feed, they've got their logarithms to feed you things you might be interested in. So you can certainly take a look at what they recommend. You also can search for them yourself. I just double checked this. I think that LinkedIn is always changing, which is one of the things that keeps us in business. When you click the search box, it doesn't seem to pop up the groups right away, but if you type in groups, it will bring up filters that allow you to click on that feature. But another interesting way is to look at people's profiles, as I mentioned. It's very often at the bottom of a profile if you scroll down, and I'll show you that in a little bit if we've got time to actually visit LinkedIn. And you can see what groups they belong to and sort of look for patterns. There may be particular groups that seem to be very popular or, that a lot of seem to be very central to your field, and that can be helpful as well. I meant to make a note of this at the beginning. This is a very text-heavy presentation, I think a little heavier than usual. I was going to edit some of it out, but instead I think I may just go through some slides relatively quickly, but I wanted, when you do get the PowerPoint in the follow-up email, which you'll get, and it'll be posted to the Alumnae website, I thought it would be helpful to have some of these more detailed steps in here, even if I don't go over each and every one verbally. Just wanted to mention a couple of Barnard groups on LinkedIn. If you type in Barnard in the search bar, a lot are going to come in. The largest group is Barnard College Alumni and Affiliates. And so students can join, alumni can join, people, staff members. And I just checked the stats and we've popped up above 6,700 members. So as I mentioned, the group itself and then the actual number of alumni who are on LinkedIn are definitely larger numbers than you find on Barnard Connect. And that can be helpful. And then there's a lot of interest groups by field. I'm aware of some. There may be, anybody can establish a group, but there's one for law, tech, the Barnard Entrepreneurs Network, Barnard Women in Entertainment have a LinkedIn group. So if you're looking for particular areas, and then you also can take a look. You don't have to just look for groups affiliated with Barnard Columbia. There's a number of Seven Sisters groups, and then there's ones that are identified as Ivy League. So there's a number of different ways of sort of tapping into these groups and networks. Oops. But then let's talk about making individual connections. All right. So similarly, as soon as you log on to LinkedIn, it will start suggesting possible contacts, and some of them are going to be based on Barnard and other aspects of your profile. So, you can always look at those suggested profiles if they're open to you. That depends on how people have placed their settings. You can look at who else they know. That can often be a clue as to who they are and why they're being recommended. And then you just want to think about whether to connect to them or not. You don't have to connect to anybody you don't want to, but if it's somebody you remember or somebody who's doing something interesting, working somewhere interesting, and then you can certainly go ahead and connect. And again, just repeating the adage, quality over quantity. Don't feel like you have to connect to everyone. Do take that little, take that moment to sort of look at who they are, what they're doing, and whether that's, someone of interest to you that might be helpful to reach out to and get advice. And, this is one of the tasks. You want to be sort of gradually, in times of change, you might want to more aggressively be growing your network, but in general, you want to be growing your network on a regular basis. And you certainly can use outside sources to sort of jog your memory. So if you're specifically trying to remember people from Barnard, pull out that old yearbook, take a look through. And you may be connected to, Barnard folks and other people, obviously, on other social media. And you might want to bring, look for some of those people specifically on LinkedIn, as well as, where you know them from, if you know them from Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And certainly anybody that know, you can take a look and see if they're on LinkedIn and reach out and make a connection request. And the whole goal of this is to have a way of connecting to that individual person, but then you also become connected to their network, and that person can then potentially, introduce you, within or outside of LinkedIn, and lead you to opportunities or people that you can talk to about your field or about a particular company. So there's a couple different ways of finding new Barnard connections. My preferred way is to go to what we call the Barnard College company page, but there also are filtering systems and Boolean searches, which I'll just give you a little bit of info on. So Barnard College, like most organizations, has what's called a company page on LinkedIn. And the way you find that is to type Barnard College in, and it will, I'll show you in a minute, it pops up with the icon of the blue and white seal of the college. That's how you know you're in the right place. When you click through to that, there's a tab that pops up. I don't think it's on the, I forgot to update this. They keep moving the tabs around. I think it's in the middle of the page now, but you can click on Alumni, and then it takes you to this filtering system where you can browse in a way. They have different columns for where they work, what they do, what skills they have, etc. And then if you see someone interesting, once you've clicked on your various categories or columns, you can scroll down and you'll get a little thumbnail of various alumni, and it will show how you're connected. And then if you're interested, you can click on their photo or their name and get their full profile. And that also allows you to send a customized connection request. So, and then using options at the top of the page, you can look for other key things. So let me just quickly, let me see how easy it is. I'm just going to check the time. Okay, I just want to pop over to LinkedIn itself and show you a little bit of what I'm talking about, just to break things up and also make it, more obvious. And again, I know I've got a mix of people. Some of you may be very well-versed in LinkedIn. Some of you may be relatively new or haven't been there in a while. So, so this is the home page. They changed this a number of years ago to sort of look a little bit more like a Facebook feed, and, who you hear from is going to depend on who's in your network. The key thing we wanted, this is going to be your friend, the key search bar up here. And so it obviously pops up because I do the search a lot, it automatically pops up, but you can also start typing. But this is the icon I was talking about. And that takes us to Barnard's page. All right. And this is what we want to click on, is alumni.
Please share your screen. We're not.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
I came out of share screen and didn't go back in. Okay. Let me go back then. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are. When we hit search, it automatically comes up for me, or you can type in Barnard College. This is what we're looking for. And then we click alumni. And then you see we've got over 21,000 alumni. Again, could be students, could be staff. And these are the columns I was talking about. There's 6 of them. There's where they live, where they work, what they do, what they studied, what they're skilled at, and then how you're connected. Okay, so what you can do is, actually the skill one is kind of interesting. So if, for instance, you click show more, if you were interested in any of these sort of pre-populated topics, but you also can add, but if you were interested in, say, I don't know, for some reason, the example I always use is grant writing, right? So if we add grant, oh, what did it do? And so then you can click on that, and then you can see if who might have listed that. All right, so we've got a lot of people who have grant writing somewhere on their profile. And so then what you do is you scroll down below these bar graphs, and this is where you get the thumbnails. So again, who pops up is going to depend on your network, so you might not get the exact type of thing. Pro tip, never hit connect from the thumbnail, because that sends an automatic generic connection request, and you always want to customize. If you are going to send a connection request to somebody, you want to customize it. So if you want to know more about Dorothy, for instance, you get her current title, you can scroll down, you can find out where she's been, what she does, etc. All right, where, when did she go to Barnard? Sometimes people put the date, sometimes they don't, and what she studied. And then this is what I meant down at the bottom where you have interests. When you click on that, oh, it's not, sometimes there's a menu that pops up with specific groups, but you can see that, again, this combination of alma maters and then in this case, an industry-based, right? And she belongs to that group I mentioned, the Barnard College Alumni and Affiliates. So that's one way to find people. And then the other way, let me just go back for a second, is this is a very handy box. So if we get rid of grant writing, all right, and then this, you can put in anything here. So here's where you could put a specific title, a company, so if we wanted to find out, I don't know why, I think I always use Google because it's easy to type. If we wanted to find out if we have alumni working at Google, yes, we do. All right, so over 1,000. All right. It doesn't necessarily mean they're currently there. And that's why you have to delve in. And then, so again, if you want to put Google, but then if you want to, narrow that down, you can click on some of these specific things. So that's how that works. And I'm going to go ahead back to the PowerPoint. And then if we have a chance to circle back to some of that, we can do that. Great. Excellent. Great. So you have in writing those various steps that I just showed you. Okay. And all right. And then there's another way. I'm not going to walk through that, but if you can get the same information, but it can be, they have one additional thing that's really helpful, which is current company. So if you go, instead of just skip over the Barnard part and just go to the main search bar, type in people and then select all filters, and then it allows you to kind of click off some of the same things that we just saw, but when you get to company, it allows you to put current or former, and that can be helpful to know who's actively there, but it also can be interesting to find people who used to be there, who can often be really good resources of information. So that's another way of searching on LinkedIn. And then I just wanted to mention Boolean searches. These are very focused. Boolean is I'm not a computer person, but I think it's a fairly common term within the tech world. And there's actually instructions for this on LinkedIn. If you type help and then type Boolean, they give you a lot of examples of this. That's where I drew some of this. But you can use, when you're doing these searches, if you put quotes around it, that way you get the exact phrase, not just product or manager. And then you can use the nots, the ors, the ands, and the parentheses to be super focused, so that if you want to look at VPs, but not an assistant VP or a senior vice president, you just, you can get fairly granular. So just so people know about that. But key point, after all of this searching, what do you do? And this is where, again, I've given some fairly detailed ideas here. I don't want to dwell on all of them, but generally, people approach this different ways. My preferred method is a two-step process. One is to get connected on LinkedIn, and you can send a connection request without having to have a paid membership, and to a lot of people, not everybody, but you can send a connection request to a lot of people. You're limited to characters. You want to keep it short anyway. And basically, the key thing, it's just 3 key things. You want to say how you're connected. So in this case, it might be Barnard. say something that shows that you actually looked at your profile and you're not just, reaching out to 1,000 people at the same time. And then your request, you always want to ask for something in a networking situation. And your request is here, would love to connect here at LinkedIn. And if you do hear back from them, and you may not, they could ignore you because they're busy, or because they don't come on LinkedIn very often, or they don't network unless they know the person already. There's all sorts of reasons. It's generally, it's never personal. And then from there, you can follow up. All right. So anybody who does get back to you, and you can do that either using LinkedIn message if you want. I would say you can use that as long as if the person's gotten back to you relatively quickly. But if somebody takes a long time to get back to you, that generally implies that they're not on LinkedIn a lot. And so once you are connected to them, you can see their email generally. And so you could reach out that way. So, and then this is where you tell a little bit more about who you are and what you're looking for, and then ask for something specific, right? So it could be an informational meeting, it could be advice, but you don't want to lead with the job or job lead. First of all, for practical reasons, most people off the top of their, at any given moment, don't have a job lead. And second of all, that can be off-putting coming from somebody they don't know well, even if you do have this strong connection. So, so ask for advice, ask for informational meeting. Those tend to get a pretty good response. Just one point, if you find, I guess, a high value connection, I define that as somebody who is, maybe it's somebody who's working at your dream organization in the area you most want to be in. Then you might want to not go directly to a generic LinkedIn, connection request, but you might want to be a little bit more strategic. And so then you might want to, look through the connection, see if there's somebody who could introduce you. And then that increases the chance that they'll get back to you, and you'll be able to make that really strong, strong connection. And before we move out of, different methods, I did want to mention the Bold, Beautiful Barnard Alumni Plus Facebook group. There are a number of Facebook groups, but this was launched 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say. It's not run by the college. It wasn't launched by us. It was launched by, it was started and managed by Lisa Lynn, class of 98, and she's got a couple of other alums who help her manage the group. Generally speaking, it's a private group, which means, and that's why it's really good for networking, because it becomes a safe space, at least a safe digital space, for people to make inquiries about all sorts of things. It's not just job related. So some of you may already be members. If you aren't, you can ask, some of your Barnard connections if they are, and they can invite you in. There's a Google Doc. I did not hear it. I had heard from Lisa a little ways back that it was not working properly. So if you get an error message when you try and connect to this, don't be alarmed. I need to circle back to her and see if that's up and running again. And if it's not, we'll come up with another way to get a request. You do have to be a Facebook member to be able to join the group, just to sort of state the obvious. And then again, there are smaller groups also on Facebook. So there's a fairly active Women in Tech group, Women in Education on Facebook, Barnard Women in Education. There's a couple of sort of subgroups that, are industry specific and have a fair amount of activity in them as well. So, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about in-person or live networking as a complement as to all the online stuff we've been talking about, and give you some ideas there, and then we'll open things up for questions. So, so yeah, like I said, text heavy. Just wanted to shout out some various things. Again, we're coming out of pandemic times, and you all know, some things are opening up, some things are slower to open up. But as these things either stay online or continue online or become available in person, you're looking for things that, are live, things where you actually are interacting or hearing a speaker live or having an opportunity to connect to people in a, in real time basis is what we're talking about. So, and like I said, not going to go over the whole list, but I wanted to point out, I'm sort of new to the world of mini conferences. You know, a lot of us are familiar through our professions with the big national conferences, which often involve, if they're not in your hometown, often involve travel and expense, and will again eventually as they come back online, come back in person. But there's a lot of these national organizations, professional organizations that have, you know, smaller regional groups, and those conferences can be easier to present at, easier to get into. So it's something to look around at. And, you know, volunteer roles within professional organizations can, again, be a really good way to get involved and sort of get even more strongly connected to people in the field. Volunteer work in general is a source of networking, especially if you're, it could be any volunteer work, because, you know, volunteer work obviously draws people from across, you know, all sorts of sectors and communities. And so it is a way to broaden who you know. Or you can strategically do volunteer work in a field, in an organization that you're interested in. I don't know, this is so old fashioned, but it is true that dentist, hairdresser, bartenders are friendly, chatty people who meet all types, and you never know, you know, they often ask you, oh, what do you do? What are you doing? And so you never know where a connection might come. So couple of tips. The second one I learned at a conference that I was at, and one of the panelists it was a panel of recruiters, and one of them started out her part of the panel presentation by saying, she looked at her phone and she said, here's 3 people that I'm really interested in meeting. And she read 3 names, and she said, how did I find out about these 3 people? They were at the event and had out under the event hashtag. And to her, I think she was in the digital space, social media space. So she saw that as being, you know, savvy. And these are people who knew how to use tools, and that people she would like to connect to and talk to. So, the panelists and speakers, you know, you're probably familiar with, you know, there'll be a rush afterwards. You know, a tip I've read is to get there a little early and connect with a speaker or a panelist ahead of time. You know, it doesn't have to be a big extensive conversation, but just a brief introduction, and then, you know, you can follow up. So, and I think the 4th bullet is my favorite for, you know, working with introverts. There's a book called actually Networking for People Who Hate Networking. And one of the things that's true is, if you aren't super comfortable wading into a large group and doing that kind of, you know, that type of networking or, you know, conversation, that sometimes having a volunteer role can make you feel a lot more comfortable. So. And then, as I said, you know, you've met somebody in person or at an online conference, you know, a virtual conference, but then you can, you know, cement that connection. You can follow that up by making a direct connection on LinkedIn or somewhere else. So. Few words about informational interviews. When you know, it is a great thing to ask for, and, you know, just a couple of tips here on how to approach those. I think most of you probably have done this before, but we definitely talk to students and young alums who are like, I'm supposed to talk to this person for 20 minutes. What do I actually say? So a couple of ideas here. And then you always do want to follow up, you know, even just a quick, you know, it could be a quick message on LinkedIn, a quick email, or if you are talking to someone for the first time and aren't connected yet, you could follow up with that. And it's always great if you talk to somebody specifically about exploring a new opportunity or about opportunities at their company or insight into their field. It's always nice to circle back when you've made the change, like if you've launched your business or made a shift or gotten a new job. Doesn't have to be right away. It can just be part of your chores, your, you know, LinkedIn tasks. But it is always good. It kind of positively reinforces networking to let people know that their advice helped, or talking to them helped clarify or led to such and such connection. So, okay. Great. So I think I've left some time. Yep, we've got some time for questions. I'm sure there'll be a lot. Wow, we're past the halfway point now. We've got 3 topics coming up. Interviewing. I'll be here briefly at the beginning next week to introduce my colleague Amanda Dye, who will be talking to you about interviewing strategy. And then I'll come back for the last 2 topics: negotiating the job offer, or other, you know, even more broadly, sort of, you know, negotiating in general, although we'll focus specifically on on jobs, and then a look to the future, managing your ongoing professional development, whether you've decided to stay put or you're not launching your job search, or just looking ahead to when you have made the change, how can you continue to develop professionally and keep options and choices open. As always, you're welcome to follow up with an advising appointment, and some of you have recently become familiar with Handshake, and if you're still not, the easiest is to email us at Beyond Barnard and we'll get you set up. So let me stop sharing my screen and open up the floor to questions. We've got a couple in the chats. Barnard company lists. I just want to make a quick screenshot for. Oh, the Barnard company list slide. Which one was that? Was that when we were actually on LinkedIn, or the directions? I'll wait for the person to get back to me. I'll circle back to that one for sure, once I'm clear on what you're looking for. And let me open up, feel free to unmic or come on camera or type in a message. The slide about the Barnard LinkedIn page. Excellent. Okay, cool. Let me just quickly go back to sharing my screen so that we can go back to that. Whoops. Great. There we go. Let me go into present mode. Let you get your screenshot. Oh. Great. Okay. And the slides, as well as a link to the recording, get sent to you tomorrow or Thursday or Friday of each week following a presentation, and then they are on the alumni website as well. So, can alumni connect with other alumni on Barnard Connect, or only with current students? With each other. So that we just added that feature, I want to say back in March. So you now have the ability to connect alumni to alumni using the Barnard Connect platform. As I mentioned, we launched that two years ago, and so our current students or recent graduates have been able to use it to reach out to alumni, and that's been going really well. But now alumni can reach out directly to each other as well. So, and if you have having any issues with getting connected to Barnard Connect, or how it works, my colleague Alexa Hamill is our project manager for Barnard Connect. But the easiest is to just send any inquiries or questions to beyondbarnard@barnard.edu, and we'll get that to Alexa or whoever can answer the question. So, and great. And while I'm waiting for other questions, let me put, so to get to Barnard Connect, it's barnardconnect.barnard.edu. So if you cut and paste that, I don't think it came up as a link, but if you cut and paste that, it'll take you to that site. Other questions? Yeah, so my direct email is cshin@barnard.edu. If you're looking to make an appointment, the most efficient is to send it to the general Beyond Barnard, because then people can get you set up on Handshake. Yeah, but feel free to reach out to me directly if you would like. Otherwise, sort of general questions and getting an appointment. So could you please go back to the Google search page? There were 2 columns, looked as if there were only 40 people at Google. Yeah, I think there was a big number up top, and then as we filtered down, we saw more. Let me give me a couple minutes before I go back into the presentation to show you that, or go back onto LinkedIn to show you that. Let me see if there's any more questions in the meantime. Otherwise, I'm happy to. Okay, hang on. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'll go ahead and go back to. Great, so if we click alumni. Oops, sorry, let me just scroll down. Okay, yeah, so when I narrowed it down to greater New York City area, oh, I see, you're talking about the 40 at Google. So, yep. So that's when you narrow it down to, let me take that away. Yeah, when you narrow it down to greater New York City area, it's fewer. And then what you want to do is scroll down below all the bar graphs, and then you can start to see. So you can tell, as you're scrolling through, you can tell generally, as long as their LinkedIn's updated, they give you the current job title. So you can make a quick look at, you can see if somebody is still currently there, and then you get a little bit of information about, when they graduated and what their major was. But then, as I said, you can click either on their picture or their name for more information, right? Sometimes people will come up in a Google search, in this search, they're not actively, they no longer work there, but have, prior worked. So great. And then if you want to unclick, if we take out greater New York City area, right, then you've got a larger number, 80, and you can again narrow it down by a particular area, or you can go over to what they do. These are LinkedIn sort of preset categories. And then, but anywhere where you see a plus add, you can put in a more focused search term that's more helpful for you. And then if you want to narrow it down to, what particular skills they might have. So is that, hopefully that's helpful. Let me stop sharing again, see what we've got. Okay, some more questions. Okay, mostly thank yous. And good. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, pleasure as always to speak with you, even though it's speaking into the odd void that we are living in now. But thank you for taking the time to attend, and hopefully we'll see you sometime in the next couple of weeks if those topics are of interest to you, and feel free to reach out with any questions or suggestions. Take care, everybody.